know when I start.
You're live. Wait a second. Let me push this. You're live now. Go.
All right. So today we begin with Vayikra, chapter 6, verse 6. You guys, if you're using a Christian Bible, we'll be looking at Leviticus chapter 6, verse 12. It's a little bit different in the counting here. 13, sorry. So 6:13, if you've got a Christian Bible, I don't know what else to call it. I don't know of any Jewish Bible that does that type of numbering. So in the Jewish study Bible, and if you have a Tanakh or a Torah, whatever you're using, the numbers will be 6:6, chapter 6, verse 6. All right, so when last we met, we were looking at a verse that translated verse 5, and the fire which is kindled on the altar he will not extinguish, and the coal will burn it morning by morning, and arrange it on the burnt offerings, and make smoke on it from the fat of the peace offerings. So that might ring a bell. So our literal translation here, just directly into English with no care about what does it mean, but just what does it say. The words would basically be, fire continually kindled upon the altar, not you shall extinguish. So your first word is esh. You know, it's that word that kind of sounds like fire. To me, that sounds more like someone pouring liquid on a griddle, but it's supposed to be a fire sound, and it's fire. It's what you think it is. And then we have, that's followed by Tamid, not Talmud, but Tamid. And Tamid is continually, it's perpetuity, continuance. It's the opposite of to quit. So it's to keep it doing it, keep going. Then it says tukad, and that's the word for kindle, to set a fire. That's the process of to set up. Could you imagine? You got the fire blazing and you're still trying to start one because you got to continue to see. Just saying. Then it says all, the Hebrew word all, not the English word all, but the Hebrew word all, not really al either. But anyway, it's on or upon. What are you going to continually to kindle this fire on? Ha-mizbeach. I know you understand that word, right? The altar. On the altar. And this says lo, so that's not no, that's the negative article. Ticheveh. You will not extinguish this thing. You will not put it out. It will not be quenched. You don't cover the fire with ashes to put it out. You don't cover it with water. You follow? All right, so verse 13 translates out, the fire will be kindled continually on the altar, and you shall not extinguish it. Think about what's being said. It will be kindled continually, and you will not extinguish it, right? You don't keep kindling a fire that doesn't extinguish. Just think about that a minute. If a fire never goes out, it's only kindled one time. And you're being told to kindle it without stop, and don't stop, don't extinguish the kindling. It's not saying, it doesn't say don't extinguish the fire, right? It says don't extinguish, you shall not extinguish. Yeah, it's talking about the kindling. And remember what we started off with, reminding you of last week. It will burn morning by morning. What would that tell you if you now know that you're not going to stop kindling a fire? It tells you that the fire is kindled every morning, and it's not put out until the sacrifice is finished. Now, I know that every sage in the Dark Ages just rolled over in their grave, right? Because they believe that the fire could never, ever, ever go out. Well, if your source for fire are trees, what do you think is going to happen when you run out of trees? So God's not going to give an order here that cannot be followed. He's yeah, that's something Donna just said. Besides, they had to pack it up and move it. Were they just carrying the fire with them and the logs? you got to think that one through, right? So there's something for us to all think about. Now let's move on to our next verse. Very literally, verse 7 in my case, 14 in yours. And this instruction, the gift, make come, so we know that's bring, her, well, it would be an arrow, her children, Aharon, to faces Yahweh, to faces the altar. All right, so vizot and this, they didn't say hazot. Remember I talked about that where they say the this more often than not. Again, in this verse, they're not saying hazeh. They've left the definite article out. They're just saying zot, which is also the word zeh, right? It's the feminine plural is the only reason why it sounds a little different. Some people take these things like this as proof that there are different authors. They're like, well, see, this author, he used zeh and zot without the definite article. So this is one guy. And then over here, where it's using hazeh and hazot, that's another one. And over here, this guy's using Elohim. And over here, this guy's using Yahweh. And over there, he's using Adonai, or over there he's using Hashem. And they think these are, for years they thought that this was proof of different writers. And we know from the studies into the I had the word in my head and it just jumped out. Kasuto, what did he study? The stuff that came out of Mesopotamia. I can't think of the word. Anyway, from studying that, we know that the same author authored those stories, the great thing, the word great's in it, the great epic. Or is it the epic something? You guys look it up. Kasuto, look what he studied. Anyway, that study proved out that this was something that the Jews did to break up monotony, not to show it didn't happen because the authors were changing. It happened because they don't like saying the same thing over and over and over again unless they're trying to show either continuance or that's their way of putting an exclamation mark on a sentence back in a day and time when they had no punctuation, right? And that was the only reason why they wanted to do it. So they would change things up so that didn't happen. Anyway, so our next word, Torah, instruction. It's not Torah, this is the feminine version of the word, but it's not Torah as in law. That's not the word for law. The word for law is mitzvah, mitzvot. These are the words where you get the idea of law and judges and stuff like that. Torah, Torot, those are the instructions that you're given that tell you how to carry out the laws that you're not allowed to break, or the things that God has told you that you must do. For instance, you must wear a fringe, right? So the Torah is the instruction on how to wear the fringe. The Bible doesn't give a lot of Torah on fringe wearing, but man has written, 350-page books. They made up for all the stuff they feel that God messed up on. I'm just saying. We've talked about that, so I'm going to move on. So you understand this is instruction. This is how you carry out God's law. So always know the difference between instruction and law. Very important. Our next word is ha-mincha. That's the gift. A gift is often called tribute. It's often called a bribe. It's often called campaign contributions. Let's get off of that quickly. But it really can be a gift. You like somebody, you buy them a nice little gift and that sort of thing. But it's also what they call tributary. It's also tithe. So you're saying, well, how can it be a gift if God told me that I had to pay it? Well, he's just told you how much the gift is supposed to be if you decide to give the gift. I'm just saying. Our next word, hakerev. I think more modern people would say hakrev, but I'm absolutely convinced at this point that it would have been broken up when it was a more basic language, and it would have been hakerev. And that's to bring, it's to make come. So we would say bring in English. It would literally translate as make come. But like I said, when you translate it, you should use the word bring it because it makes more sense. But this idea of to approach, to come near. You're making someone, you're telling them, look, if you're going to make this sacrifice, you need to go get your little sheepy thing and bring him over here, and we'll do this and that, and then we'll bring him over here. So it's the instruction, if you will. It's okay, now it's your turn, come on up. So you're essentially making them come to you, to come near you. This is otah. So it's make them come. Literally, that's her. The word her, like as in her instead of him. And who's the her? Now remember, this doesn't mean it's a woman. This is a terrible one. This has got every exception to a rule in every word. Who's coming? B'nai, children. Why is it her? Because anytime in biblical Hebrew that you talk about a crowd, you say it in the feminine. Because women are included. Not that they're excluded if they don't do that. I'm just saying, if you're talking about a crowd in the language of Hebrew, you say your word in the feminine. So normally in the book, you'll see them say son. Because if you're Aharon and you have no daughters, and it says to bring his children, what do you think the translators do? Oh, well, his children are all boys. Bring his sons. I use the word children because I want to be more accurate, more straight to the point. I don't care if he had daughters or didn't have daughters. It doesn't matter to me. The word is children. So it's the B'nai, bring the children of Aharon. And now you see why it probably says son if you're using a English text. Even if you're reading the Jewish Study Bible, I almost bet it says sons. And then the next word is lipnei, two faces. You remember, this is our idiom. This is because it says two faces Yahweh. So again, the reason why it says faces and not face is not because there's a Trinity. It's not because there's a duality like the Gnostics. It's not because there's one like the oneness Pentecostals. The reason why it's in plural is because it indicates that God is alive. If he's alive, he's happy, he's sad, he's angry, he's all those things. Just read the Bible. So because he's alive, it's said in plural. That's the only reason. So then bring them to the faces of God. So that's idiomatic, right? Bring them into the presence of God. God's going to be there when these sacrifices are made. And then it says El. El is a sound-alike word. And it's also a spelled-alike word. El can be the generic word for God. We don't need that because we've already given you the actual name of God. So you don't need the generic word. But it can be, as in El or Elohim, if you're saying it in the plural, but it's from that same root. Or it means to, like T-O, from here to there, right? That's what this is, T-O. It is not God. And then it says to Panay, and Panay is, it's the plural of face, so it's faces. What was our last faces? It was Panim, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, Lipnei. So you got Lipnei, Pane, Panim. What? Well, Lipnei is two faces. Pane is just faces. El Pane is another way to say two faces. To the bring. You got to turn them toward, because they're walking toward the east and the presence of God is over here. You got to turn them toward it. So there's reasons why they have, but in the end it's all pane. It's from that same root word, which is face. And it's used idiomatically because you can't look into the face of God and survive, right? That's not what they're telling you. So we know that it means that you're coming into the presence of God. Even if you can't see it, I'll bet you they could feel it. I'm just saying. Then it says you bring him to the faces of God, and now it's saying to the faces of HaMizba'ah. You recognize it, right? The altar. So you're going to be in the presence of the altar. Or maybe you could say you're going to be in front of the altar, right? You're in front of God and you're in front of the altar. So it's being very specific about where you're supposed to make these people stand. You're making them come and stand. All right, so your translation, and there's some here it looks like. My translation, and this is the instruction of the gift offering. The children of Aharon will bring it before Yahweh, before the altar. Onkelos and Pseudo Jonathan changed the words from to Yahweh to before Yahweh. They did this to dehumanize God. Their reasoning at the time was that they believed God to be so far beyond human existence that to speak of him in human terms was to diminish God in some way, as if that were even possible. So when the Bible text spoke of God as having eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands, arms, legs, feet, the Targumist always changed the text. For example, looking at Genesis 6:8, it says, and Noah found grace in the eyes, ba'enei is the word in Hebrew, in the eyes of, and it gives God's name, Yahweh. And they changed it in the Aramaic to say, but Noah found favor, kadam, which means with. And so Noah found favor with Yahweh instead of in the eyes of Yahweh. Years later, when poorly trained, if trained at all, rabbim, that's rabbis said properly, predominantly during the Dark Ages, came to see God as an angry, petty, jealous, narcissistic turd who could not wait to punish someone for every little thing they did or did not do. And God forbid there be the slightest misstep in carrying out any of his laws, as this would surely lead to a horrific end to any Jew who would commit such a careless act. I mean, I tried to make that sound that bad. I really did. Because this is truly the way they saw God. And it is truly the way I saw God. Because of this kind of teaching. Because when you take the Word of God, God was looking for an intimate relationship with his people. He meant for us to stand face to face with him. No, we couldn't see him. But how can you stand face to face? If you were blind 100%, not just legally blind, because some people are legally blind but can still see shadows. I'm talking beyond that. 100% your eyes don't work. If somebody were standing right in front of your face, you would know it. Right? That's what God was looking for. But these men, thinking themselves smarter than God, decided to change words like that and take the intimacy completely out. And what they said is not exactly wrong, because to find favor with God is pretty much the same thing as to find favor in the eyes of God, right? They're not really changing what it means, they're changing what it does. It takes that that knowledge of God completely out of it. It makes him more of a computer than a being with feelings. And God has feelings. I mean, read the Bible. He gets mad. He gets happy. He fell in love. It says when he found Israel, he fell in love with her. And I'm not going to tell you where it says that. You look it up. It says that. God fell in love with her. It was the time, how do you put that? The time of her, might have said love. The time of her love. You'll find it, maybe.
Well, what it did was, like I said, take the intimacy out, make him way up there.
Yeah. When they took the intimacy out, when God couldn't touch his people anymore, and God couldn't hear his people anymore, and he couldn't see his people anymore, and he didn't have a mouth to talk to them anymore, God's name was taken to vain. Anyway, let's move on before I get upset. All right, now we're on my verse 8. I don't remember where you guys should be if you're 15. Okay, is that what I said up here? Oh, no, mine says 14. Oh, we're moving to the next one, so that is 15. You're right. Okay. Literally, it would say, and make rise from us with handful he from fine flour. This would start really sounding familiar. The gift, and from fat her and arrow at the frankincense that upon the gift, and make smoke the altar, scent soothing memorial her to Yahweh. Oh, I like the way this one ends. There's a verse in this chapter that you guys are going to love. I cannot wait till we get to it. This one isn't it, but this is a good one. It's going to be very funny. You're going to love it. All right, so anyway, it says, and it wasn't written as a joke. It's just that after what some of us have been through growing up, it's going to be funny. Anyway, it's in this chapter. What we're starting off with is Veherim, and make rise, to lift up oneself, to rise, to arise. To the heart can be risen up, it can be proud. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Your child does something and you feel the pride. That's not a bad thing. So pride doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but it can. It can be a negative thing. But here, it's neither good or bad. It's just that this word is used in this way is all it's saying. The eyes are lifted up means you're being a snoot, to show oneself powerful, triumphant, exalted, become high. They use this word of all of that stuff, and it's just standing up from a chair. It's all those things. Then we have mimanu. Mimanu. That's an easy one. You should put this on your list to memorize and know exactly what this means every time you hear it, because it's the same thing every time. In English, it means from us. From us. This pie was from us. Mimanu. So you say, how do you say that in Hebrew? That in Hebrew. Now I've done it. I'm going to be tickled. Hazeh, y'all. No, that's this. Let's move it on. Bekumzo, or modern Bekumzo. Again, this is from a time when Hebrew was a very primitive language, and you would have had to have broken these words up by syllable. They would have each been spoken separately, and they would not have slurred together like they have in modern Hebrew. So it's bekumzo to say it properly, although you would probably say it faster than that if you were just talking. It's literally means with handful he. So you remember that whole handful argument? We'll get to it. You'll remember. If you don't remember it, you will. Misolet, from the fine flour. Ha-mi-ha. We've already had this word today. The gift, the bribe. It can really be a gift. It can be a bribe. It can be a tithe. All those things. Then we have umi shamna, and from fat her. And remember, the her here is not from a woman. It's the feminine of our word it. It's the same as so from its fat, we would say probably. And that's it's fat. Like I have a fat belly, right? There's fat in there. That's why it's fat. Well, I also have a big lump of lard there that's not fat, but I have what's that called?
Hernia.
I got a really big hernia right there too. But there's some fat filling in the sides. I'm just saying. It's talking about that stuff, right? The flabby stuff. And when you put that fat, when you got the meat, and you know how you see the cook in your family cut that white stuff off of the meat, that's the fat. When you put that on there, you don't take it all off because that's where your flavor is. Anyway, so your next word, ve'et, which is the arrow. The et word has no meaning, so it's and then it's pointing to something. Then it says kol, which is all, its totality, so that's not what the arrow's pointing to. It's going to have to be next, and there's ha levona, or halvona would probably be the way this. I don't know a lot of the modern stuff. I'm trying to learn it, but I'm not giving it much of an effort now. I'll have to at some point, I'm sure, but I'm still putting it off. That's the frankincense. That's a word for frankincense. If you've never seen frankincense, never smelt it or held it in your hands, buy some. It's a different experience. Buy some. You can get it at your grocery store, maybe if you got one that has a lot of good spices and stuff. If not, you can certainly get it over the interweb, because that's where we got ours. We bought some so we could see it and hold it and smell it. You should do that. Everybody should do that in life so that they know what it is. That's followed by the word asher, which it's okay. I'm going to say three words, and it's the third word. This or that. That's the word asher. That. This or that. Our next word is all. It's a Hebrew word all, which means on or upon. Then we have ha-mincha. Have you heard that word before? Gift, tribute. What else did you say a while ago? Tithe. It's a gift. Vehi ketir. And make smoke. It makes a scent. In other words, you put it on the altar. They're telling you to cook it. Remember, this is an idiomatic language. So instead of saying put it on the grill and make it and cook it, they just say make it smoke. That doesn't mean that there has to be smoke coming up. Some people will argue with that. The reason why it says make smoke is because if you put it on there, what's going to happen? Smoke's going to go up. At least it should. It will if I could. There'll be lots of puffy black clouds coming out of it. Anyway, but the idea is really not so much the smoke as it's the scent. That's what gives off the fragrance. That's what gives off the smell, the odor that comes from it when you cook it. And that comes out of that stuff, that the smoke, the gas, or whatever you call that. I'm not sure if that's a gas where the smell's coming from, or if it's just literally coming from the smoke. Somebody that cooks ought to look that up, because I don't really know.
I cook and I don't know.
Donna says, I cook and I don't know. Well, if she doesn't know, it can't be known. Anyway, if someone wants to look that up, we'll toss it in next week or something. Okay, so I did the and smoke. This is ha meets the ox, so and smoke it on the fire. It's not exactly what we think of as smoking ribs or something. It's just cook it on the fire. Then it says reach. So that's the word for scent. That's the smell that's coming up. So it's this smell, this scent, and it says nihoach. That is, it's satisfying. It brings delight. It is sweet. It smells good, if you will. Az karata. May not remember that word. We haven't had it in a while. It's a memorial. It's something that recalls a memory, something that reminds you of something. Anyway, then it says La Yahweh, so it's a reminder for Yahweh, because if you don't do it, he'll forget. No, don't print those words. I'm just kidding. All right, so the translation. And he will lift up from the gift offering a handful of fine flour, and of the fat, and all the frankincense. You remember that thing about the 3 fingers and then the handful? It's a real handful, just saying, in case I don't see what's below it, so I don't know if I put a reminder in there or not. But just in case, I want to say that so I don't forget. So, and he will lift up from the gift offering a handful of fine flour, and of the fat, and all the frankincense which is on the gift offering, and make smoke on the altar, a soothing reminder for Yahweh. You guys remember this part? We can compare that to chapter 5, verse 12. And bring it to the Cohen, and the Cohen will take a handful from it, the fine flour, and from that handful he will make a memorial of smoke, and make it burn for you on the fire for Yahweh for his sin. We can also compare that to chapter 2, verse 2. And bring it to the children of Aharon, the Kohanim, the priests in plural, of its flour and from its fat, with all its vonata, all its frankincense, and the Cohen will make smoke. And this was written a little differently. This was God talking, and I will remember it. And you, Yisrael, will make it, speaking of the offering, burn a sweet scent. Remember that meant obedience. He was talking about their obedience to Yahweh. So doing this thing that God has asked us to do, when we bring it to the priest and they go through it and they have you come over here and do this, they walk you through that whole process. Remember, the priest becomes your covering. And when all of that happens, and we're at the place where we can now, even though we can't see God, be face to face with him. I'm trying real hard not to lose it here. That pleases God Almighty. Of the words, the fistful, so I did put this in here. Based on Sifra and the Babylonian Talmud, specifically Yoma 47a, Rashi, Rashbam, and Haskuni said that it was only the amount that could be held in 3 fingers, which I'm going to skip that. That's so dumb, I don't even want to talk about it. And then in the Talmud, the same set of books, in Menachot 11a, it says it's a whole fist was used. Colin DeLuch said it was a whole fist. It's a whole fist. You know how I know? Because the Word of God says it's supposed to be. All right. Of the word fat, Sifra said that if so much as a grain of salt or the most minute amount of frankincense were mixed, the entire offering would be invalid, because only fat can be mixed with flour. They're making up their own laws, making up their own rules. Fooey on you, God. You don't know enough. We're gonna help you out here. Oh, I hate this approach to religion. I really do. All right. Of the words remember and memorial, Onkelos by Drauzine and Wagner, that set of books behind me that I don't like the idea of following Onkelos as the end all be all. We should put him on a pedestal and this work should be the definitive work. No, we have the Hebrew text. It should be the definitive work and is. So I have a problem with that kind of thinking. And I have a big problem with the fact that he took the intimacy away. He took the face-to-face experience with God away. He took the knowing that God holds us away. I don't like that. But the work as a translation and to help us learn things is immense. It's worth having. So I'm very conflicted about this work. The best work I know in the translating and the understanding of the Onkelos is in English was done by Drauzine and Wagner. If you're going to get the Onkelos, get theirs. Anyway, by the way, Drauzine and Wagner, I should get some money for that plug. I'm just saying. They said the precise meaning of Scripture's azkarata is difficult to determine. And again, as with virtually all the technical terms in Leviticus, and they're right, because these technical terms are used essentially 1 to maybe 3 times in the whole Bible, and it's always in conjunction with this technical stuff, and we don't have anything to base it on. So the exact meanings, everybody, including myself, we're all guessing. These are educated guesses. They're not just pulling something out of the air. We have something to base it on, but we can't be absolutely sure we're right. That's all I'm saying. And that's what they're saying. Where was I? Technical terms, blah, blah, blah. They go on to say that Rashi, based on Sifra, taught the word was based on the Hebrew root zahar, which is not zagaraj. Anyway, it means remember. They point out that Onkelos would never have translated this way because he wanted to avoid the idea that God might forget something. The little joke I made. I didn't remember that this was in here, but hey, it fits, right? They didn't want people to think that God would forget something, and I guess in their time maybe people thought that way, and probably in our time people would think that way, but I would not change the word of God because some doofus is out there somewhere. Sorry, I'm just not going to do it. It takes away the intimacy. It takes away the relationship, and I don't want any part of it. What else did they say? They said some good stuff here. Okay, so Drauzine and Wagner are saying that these guys did this because, dadgummit, now I'm lost. But they point out, Drauzine and Wagner say, that Onkelos would never have translated this way because he wanted to avoid the idea that God might forget something. In other words, if the sacrifice wasn't done for some reason, or if it wasn't done correctly, God might forget, right? And this is correct. What he's saying about what they're saying, that's why Onkelos did it. I agree with him. I agree that Onkelos would not have translated the other way because of his fear of people thinking that way. So he was what he thought he was doing was keeping people from making mistakes. All right, they go on. The word does appear to be from the root zahar. Thus, with the added aleph at the beginning of it, the meaning becomes, I will remember it. This would not indicate that there might be a reason why God would not remember it. They say, like, as in senility, or perhaps error of absence or of obedience, it might be easier to think of it like the night our fathers left Mitzrayim. They covered their doorposts and lintels with the blood of sheep, and the destroyer passed by. Thus, if we make our sacrifice, in this case, God sees the smoke from the sacrifice, and the covering is accepted on our behalf. The sweetness is not our obedience in making the sacrifice, though without it there will be no sweetness. Rather, the sweetness is the fact that we are covered by the sacrifice made to God. That's what makes it so sweet, because God can now wrap his arms around us. He can now, experience us face to face, and that makes God happy. An interesting note from Onkelos by Drazian and Wagner. They said the Targum frequently changes the tenses and conjugations to create the conformity preferred in modern Hebrew and Aramaic, and renders both here as mine, which means from it. Sifra, from the school of Rabbi Akiva, felt that each word was purposely placed in the Torah to teach a lesson, and therefore the different genders must refer to different situations. And then they said, see our introduction to Genesis, where we point out that Onkelos rejects this approach and accepts that the Rabbi Ishmael, that the Torah is written in human language. Onkelos is right, is what they're saying, and I am in complete agreement with that. I'm bothered that if this is the same Rabbi Akiva that pronounced a false prophet to be the Mashiach, why is anyone listening to that man? That bothers me. And I'm relatively positive that's the same Akiva. If I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong. But, so if you're a Jew out there and you can show me how I know that it's a different Akiva, please do. If not, don't tell me I'm going to hell. I'm going wherever God decides I'm going, not you. I got to move on. Well, maybe not. I've got an awful lot of stuff here. I better maybe look some of it over. All right, so we did the senility thing, and now we're talking about that other stuff, and we got through that. Oh, in their writing on Onkelos for the book of Genesis, Bereshit, that book, they said he wrote it so that it could be understood by humans. The Torah, Rabbi Ishmael said, speaks in human language, which, with this philosophy, the Targumist, speaking of Onkelos, had no qualms in making textual adjustments, such as dropping the definite article hey, which is our word the, whenever he feels that it is superfluous, in other words, redundant. The word et, that pointer word, a word frequently placed before the accusative in Hebrew, which has no meaning in English, but which Rabbi Akiva suggests has an additional lesson, as well as the conjunctive vav, which is the reversing vav. That I just said that, not them. And they say this would, the vav is the word and in Hebrew. It's one letter and it's our word and. This and that, so it's a conjunction, it's conjunctive. They go on to say this would be, I don't know how to pronounce that word, an abomination, I'll put it that way, to Rabbi Akiva and his followers. Let me put this in modern terms. Back in all throughout the 70s, I think it began in the late 60s. I wasn't onto the scene at that point, but I caught it in the 70s. There was this battle of wits going on between I believe it was the Baptists. I'm pretty sure it was. And the atheists. The atheists were saying there is no God, and they would engage in these debates with the Baptists. Well, the Baptists kept sending unarmed men in to fight their battles for them, and the atheists kept just slicing and dicing them. After a number of years, the atheists were just making total fools out of these men. I mean, they should never have gotten on stage. They were ill prepared, if they were even prepared at all. And it was just a fiasco. It was very ugly to watch. Men who thought they were smarter than they were going up against men who were as smart as they thought they were. You know what I mean? And so they were very much embarrassing the daylights out of the Christians. And that's my opinion. That's the way I see it. That's the way I saw it. So in 1978, a group of what we now call evangelicals got together, these Baptist men with the Pentecostals and all that, a whole bunch of them, they get together and they have this big conflab. They think they're having another Council of Nicaea is what they think. Several of them said it. But they made these declarations and this is the first time in all of human history that these declarations were made by anyone. But they said that the Christian Bible was infallible, inerrant, and inspired by the Spirit of God in 1978. This is not something that Paul the Apostle taught. This is not something that Jesus taught. This is not something that Isaiah taught, or Hosea, or Jeremiah, Moses, Aaron. I'm trying to say them all in English. Or Abraham, right? None of them taught any such thing. But in 1978, here it comes. And now all these generations later, people are of the opinion that everybody has always known this. No, those of us who remember this event know good and well that it didn't happen before 1978. And in 1978, they put out this paper. What was that thing called? The Chicago Statement on Inerrancy. You can Google it. The Chicago Statement on Inerrancy. And you can read it for yourself. So they make these declarations, and those declarations were designed so that all they had to do was say that it was infallible and inspired, and now they have wiped away the arguments that the atheists were bringing. Because the atheists were bringing some really good arguments that could have been argued had these people known their Bible well enough, but they didn't. And that's what it all boiled down to. Well, this has led to, there's a man in Austin, Texas, who wrote a book, and he declared in his book that the King James Bible of today could be used to correct the mistakes in the Hebrew and the Greek text that was written at the time of the Bible. You know what I'm saying? We can go in and correct the mistakes that Moses made with the translation into English, because it was his opinion that God inspired the English translation but forgot to inspire the men who wrote it. This is exactly the same thing. This is what Akiva was pushing. It's inspired, it's inerrant, it's infallible, there are no mistakes, and if there's a comma, and there were no commas, but Akiva would tell you, if there was a comma, where there was something that we'll learn from that comma. If that word, if they've used bow in the previous sentence and halak in the second sentence, there's a deep, dark meaning there. It can't be that they're just trying to break up the monotony, right? So this is, in my mind, very problematic. I can't follow that. But that doesn't mean that Akiva wasn't a good rabbi. Probably the people who like Akiva have already turned me off. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't a good rabbi. It's just that this particular teaching was really out there. And his followers are the only ones who have ever followed this teaching that I know of. But it is exactly like what the Christians did. All right, we've got probably enough. I'm going to try. Verse 9 for me. It reads kind of funny. And leftovers from it, he ate they, Aharon and sons his, unleavened bread you shall eat in place holy, in court tent, appointed times, he eat they it. And you might have even heard the change up there. And leftovers from it, he eat they, Aharon and sons, his unleavened bread. You shall eat. Are you hearing it? And these are the kind of things that we're talking about. Onkelos changed those up so it makes sense in Aramaic, right? We do the same thing in English. We don't change tenses. Well, technically we do because we're changing them from the original language to make them all the same tense, the same gender, the same number. We do these things so that they'll make sense in our language. But in Hebrew, that's not how it works. So the Hebrew is not in need of correction. Anyway, our first word, hanoteret, and leftovers, that which is redundant. This is that idea of, let's say you take a rope and you're trying to tie up your tent, and so you go and you tie it all up, you do your fancy knots, and there's a little bit of rope left at both ends. That's the leftovers. That's what's redundant. It's a waste of rope, right? But without it, it might have been really hard to tie your knot. Just saying. But we're talking about what's. I did something to my mouse here. You get it. Do we remember Mimena? Our word of the day?
What's Mimenu from us? This is from us.
Darn. It's the same word. But Mimena is from it. It's the feminine, so it's literally from her, but we would think of it as from it. Mimenu is from us. Darn. It's not exactly the same thing, is it? It's almost, well, kind of, it's all from this group or that thing. Sorry, I got out on a limb I shouldn't have got out on. It broke off and it fell down to the ground. Next word, yochlu. He ate they. It is in the past tense, so it's to eat food. It's to devour food with gusto. But in Hebrew, they add the yod to the front of it and they add the vav to the end of it. It becomes very literally, he ate they. But it's they ate and they ate. That's the way we would say that. Well, there's no and. Not there anyway. Who is the they? Or who are the they? Aharon, it says. So that's our guy Aaron, the brother of Moshe, also known as Moses. Uvanav, and it says his children. It changes from B'nai to Banav because the ending means his. So, and children his. And again, I guarantee if you're looking at any Bible, it says and his sons, right? Because at this point, there are no women allowed to have this particular position. So they are all men. I don't know if Aharon actually had daughters or not. I really don't. Just off the top of my head, I don't remember it ever saying it. I mean, I'm sure it either does or doesn't, but I don't remember. You guys can look it up and be smarter than me. That's not hard, is it? All right, so it's our word for children. Matzot. Matzah, matzot. You guys have heard. You know that word, right? Unleavened bread. Then it says te'achel. That sounded funny. I'm losing my voice, sorry. Te'achel. Shall eat, and they shall eat the unleavened bread, right? This says bemakom, in that place. Makom is place. I'm going to stand in that spot right there, that place right there. Place is a pretty good word, I think, to use. You don't have to if you're translating, but it's the most common word, I think. And what is that place? Was Kadosh, that holy place. That place that's set aside for this very thing that we're talking about. Bahozar, in the court. The holy place in the court, in the enclosure. Ohel, that's your word for tent. Moed, the court that encloses the tent of meetings. Then Yochluha, which is literally he, eat, they, her, because it's it. It's the feminine of it. And they eat it is how we would say it. But if we break that word up, literally it's he, eat, they, her. And so what do we say in English when we translate? And they eat it. Which, of course, makes more sense, right? All right, so our translation of this verse. We are really pushing our time here. Beeper may go off. Just ignore it. All right, so it says, Aharon and his sons, or and his children, shall eat the leftovers from it with unleavened bread. It will be eaten in the holy place in the court of the tent of appointed times, or the tent of meetings. In the tent of appointed times, they will eat it. So of the words unleavened, or bread/cake, whatever your Bible, because that's like the three things. They'll either call it unleavened bread, that's two things, or they'll call it a cake. Sifra pointed out that the requirement is not to eat more than one cake. Thus, the translation was changed to the singular tense. It's in plural because there's several of them. But what he's saying is they're all just going to eat one. And there's a reason for him to say that. We've either already done it or it's coming up. I don't recall. But it is based on something real. All right. So I have very much run out of time. Let me get this timer off so it won't beep and scare anybody. All right. There we go. Hope you guys enjoyed getting back into the law. I had missed it. Well, we missed 1 week, and I just feel like, oh, it's been forever. All right. If you guys need anything, give me a call this week. Shalom, shalom, y'all.